Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Within the Pages. This is, I'm just speaking to you today, folks. That's it. No camera. And there's a reason for no camera. I don't have the books that I want to show off if I had the camera on anyway. One of them is buried on a bookshelf somewhere, and the other is a library rental. So I don't have those books to show off. And I just kind of wanted to talk and get my voice out there. I will get back to on camera book recommendations at some point, but today it just feels good just to talk, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It's going to be a little bit longer than my usual recommendation videos because I have a little bit more to say. So, without further ado, let's talk about two books that I've read recently. And the first book is Gunnar Hansen's Chainsaw Confidential. This is a memoir of his that he wrote in 2013 about the making of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in his perspective. The other book is called The Girl in the Creek by Wendy N. Wagner, and we will talk about that a little bit later on. But let's get into the Gunnar Hansen book because it is intriguing, and if you're a horror fan, if you like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this is up there with the literature you probably should be reading on if you're interested in the making of that movie. In 2013, I was listening to a podcast, and Gunnar Hansen was a guest on that podcast, and he said he was talking about his book. He was doing promotion for the book, and he said that he wanted to write it for the specific reasons that everybody was getting older, and he wanted to get all of this down on paper to sort of cement the legacy of what that movie had done for him and what it meant to him and the people involved and what they all went through to make it. And at the time, a few of the cast members and some of the crew had previously passed away. And I'm specifically talking about Jim Seidow, Paul Pertain, Robert Burns. There was a few others. And Gunnar was like, yeah, I want to get this documented because none of us are getting any younger. And sadly, 3 years later, after the release of Chainsaw Confidential, Gunnar Hansen himself passed away from pancreatic cancer. And since that time, Toby Hooper has passed away, Marilyn Burns has passed away, and the rest of the cast are up there in years. Late 70s, early 80s by now, maybe. So when you think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what comes to my mind is that late summer Central Texas heat. The sweltering, unforgiving heat. What comes to mind is a 26-hour dinner scene where the meat on the table was rotting away and none of the actors could change their wardrobes because, for continuity reasons. And everybody was miserable. They were hot. They were stinky. And they were shooting and shooting and shooting. When this book came out, I went out after I listened to that interview. I went out to my bookstore, bought this book, and devoured it. Just completely devoured it. And it's fascinating. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a movie that has intrigued me. It's inspired me. And quite frankly, scared the living hell out of me. I was young when I saw that. Probably way too young. I would say I was around between the ages of 7 and 9 years old. And I saw this movie. And I never wanted to go to Texas. Ever. Take me anywhere in the world. but don't take me to Texas. I remember being so frightened watching that movie, yet so intrigued that every time I would go back to watch it as a young person, I would get butterflies in my stomach. I would get nervous. Because by then I knew what was going to happen. And it didn't matter that I knew what was going to happen. It was still frightening. Leatherface chasing Sally around in the woods after he saws Franklin in half is some of the best work I've seen on film ever. And this book that I'm talking about is a testament to the greatness that was put into this movie. Because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to me, isn't just the greatest horror movie. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made, period. Now, that's up for debate. That's up for a lot of argument. And some would probably disagree because there are there are tons of great movies. Great movies. I myself have a top 10 list, and it's not all horror films. There are some great movies out there, but no movie has ever affected me as much as Tobe Hooper and his original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Gunnar was a poet before he was a poet, and he was a theater actor. He did a little theater acting. And he was out at dinner one day with a friend. And this friend had another friend with them. And this third party says, "Hey, you're a big guy. I know a bunch of filmmakers who need a killer for their horror film." And Gunnar said something like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." And then the third party person says, "Well, they had an actor, and he kind of holed himself up in a room, and he won't come out. He doesn't want to do it." So Gunnar goes for the audition in front of Tobe Hooper, and he fills the doorframe. And Tobe asks him 3 questions. And he says, "Are you crazy?" And Gunnar says, "No, not in the way that you think. Not the way that you think." And he goes, "Are you violent?" And Gunnar said, "No." And then he said, "Well, can you do this?" And Gunnar said, "Sure. Sure, I can do this." And Gunnar took the job serious. See, when you're behind a mask, like Kane Hodder, behind a lot of makeup, like Robert Englund, I don't know if a lot of people give those actors credit for what they actually do. They're not just chasing people around the woods and acting crazy. They are really acting. There is a defined skill set to do that. Like all the people who've played Jason, all the people who've played Michael Myers, all the people who've played Leatherface. There's a specific talent that it takes to do that. And you can't just hire any old person off the street to get behind the mask. I mean, Gunnar Hansen took that job seriously. He went to an institution for mentally handicapped people, and he walked around the grounds. He studied them. He studied the way they moved, the way they spoke, their mannerisms. And soon, he was so method with it that he blended in, and nobody knew that he was not a patient. So Gunnar gets the job. and he sized up for his suit, his costume. He is to wear 3 different masks. He's to wear the killer mask. He's to wear kind of I'm not sure what they specifically call the other mask, but basically you have the killer mask that you first see him in. Then he's in kind of the maid mask where he's cleaning up and doing house chores. Then there's a mask for the dinner table. And that's at the end of the movie when he's all dressed up and they're at the dinner table and they have Marilyn Burns over for a nice few links of sausage. And he gets sized up for all this stuff and he's ready to go. And they get on set and it's sweltering. It's not fun for any of them. A grueling schedule, probably somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks, maybe longer. They're not getting paid much. Gunnar Hansen made $800 for his role as Leatherface. Could have made a lot more money had the mafia not gotten involved. But he made $800. Tobe Hooper had made one movie before this called Eggshells. Kim Hinkle helped him write it. And then Kim Hinkle helped write the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, they say the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is based on true events, which really is not true at all. There's fragments of different situations that they took from real life, and particularly Ed Gein, and they threw it into the screenplay. So when they get on set, there's not a lot of past experience to go on. They're just kind of, I don't want to say winging it. I think Tobe Hooper knew what he was doing, knew what he wanted. And I think he got what he wanted. It also helped that he had Daniel Pearl as his cinematographer, which really, I mean, if you look at Daniel Pearl's work in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the camera, it's almost documentary style. And the cutting, Tobe Hooper's editing work and the fast, jarring cuts and that really eccentric music and noises that him and Wayne Bell did in post-production. All of these elements add to the creepiness and the overall aesthetic of this movie. And it adds to the, it's just so unsettling. But Daniel Pearl's cinematography also there's flashes of brilliance. For example, when Pam is on the bench after Kirk gets killed, it's one of the greatest dolly shots ever in a movie. And they almost didn't get it because the producers were like, hey, you don't have this in a shot list. We're not doing this shot today. And Tobe Hooper and Dan Pearl stood their ground and said, no, we are getting this shot. Back off. There are dolly shots during the chase scene with Leatherface and Sally. And I think it was like 14 feet of track or something like this. And they made it work. Gunnar Hansen tells many stories and he gets many interviews with the cast and crew. One man that I was always intrigued with was Bob Burns. He was like basically the set decorator who used real dead animals, real bones, scoured yard sales or whatever, scoured flea markets, grabbed anything he could and decorated the set, which also adds to the unsettling quality of the movie and the atmosphere. Apparently, it was supposed to be a dead dog on the side of the road first, and then they chose the armadillo. As you see the van slowly parked to the shoulder of the road. The van belonged to Ted Nicolau, who was the sound guy. He was the sound recordist. And Ted was in there, Toby was in there, the actors were in there, Daniel Pearl was in there, crammed in this van in the heat. And if you know anything about filmmaking, you can't have the windows down. It ruins the sound. So you got to keep the windows up. And you're just melting in there. And I've been in that situation last summer, actually, when we filmed Hellville. We had to keep the windows up in my car, and it was just like, oh, man. And they did this. And Ted Nicolau went on to make Subspecies, like the great. For me, I love all those movies. Radu Vladislas is the greatest vampire, right behind Max Furyk, Klaus Kinski in their renditions of Nosferatu. And Gunnar has many stories of, some funny stories. Apparently the house that they had, there was pot growing on the property. And somehow they would get into the pot, and some people would smoke it. Somebody made some brownies. When Sally crashes through the house and goes up and sees Grandpa for the first time, meanwhile Leatherface is sawing down the door. Sally comes back down the stairs, and as Leatherface crashes through the door, he does that little weird tick thing with his head, and it looks a little awkward, the movement. But Gunnar had just had himself some tasty pot brownies. So there you have it. 6'4", 6'5", whatever he was, running around with a real chainsaw, high as fuck. I can't say enough about this book. This book is completely fascinating. It just kind of puts a cherry on top for me because I adore the movie. I've always adored the movie. There's so much there's so much more I want to learn about it. Sadly, so many of the cast and crew are now gone. Kim Hinkle is still alive. Daniel Pearl is still alive and working. Kirk is still alive. Jerry is alive. Pam is alive. And I should say all the real names, but I've always known them as the characters. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but Terry, Alan, and oh gosh, what is Kirk's name? Bill Vale, yeah. And they're still around, and I don't know how much they have to do with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but at these days, I'm sure they do some conventions and stuff. But yeah, sadly, a lot of these, the original cast and crew are slowly fading with time, and that's just really sad. It just makes you realize as well, kind of selfishly, how time just goes by, and your own age is coming up on you, and you think about mortality. But that's what movies are. That's what books are. They don't age. They are there to cement the legacy. They'll be there forever. And if you're a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, you should really, really read Gunnar Hansen's Chainsaw Confidential. It has been re-released. I have the original. I have the first edition hardcover. It's been re-released in a new edition. I want to get it. I don't have it yet, but the copy I have, my original copy, that's going for some. Somebody's they're trying to sell it for like $100 or whatever. But I'll never get rid of my copy. I love it. I'm trying to think of any other. There's so much. There's so many things in this story. Apparently, going back to the original, in the first chapter when he talks about this guy who had the Leatherface role, apparently Kim Hinkle has no recollection of that. As far as they remember, Gunnar was the first and only person that they considered for Leatherface. Some of the iconic scenes, like I've talked about the dolly shot with Pam, where she's walking toward the house, the dolly goes underneath the bench, and as the dolly moves on the house just seems to grow. It's such an effective shot. But the first time we see Leatherface, when Kurt comes barging in, that is iconic. Simply iconic. And then he hits Kirk over the head and slams that metal door. That's an iconic scene. I've always loved the camaraderie between the brothers. The old man, played by Jim Seidow, Gunnar, and of course the hitchhiker. So, Jim Seidow died in 2003, and he was just a quirky character. Not in real life. Apparently in real life he was a sweetheart, but he just plays that character so well. Such a creepy old man. And when Sally's running around, when she finally gets away from Leatherface and she runs back to the gas station, there was a dilemma with shooting because Jim was supposed to really club her with the broom handle. And he didn't want to do it. And after a few hours, they're like, hey, we're losing daylight. This place is going to open and they want us out of here. You need to hit her so we can get this shot. And Marilyn Burns is just tired and weak. And she's like, Jim just hit me. So when he hits her on screen, that's real. Marilyn Burns was one tough cookie. Her shoot had to be grueling. Had to be grueling. The stuff she went through. But it's all for the sake of art. And it's certainly cemented her legacy. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre will always be, to me, just a great film. I look at it each time differently. I learn something a little different. I'm still, to this day, inspired by it. If I watch it, I immediately want to pick up my camera and go do something. If I watch it in the winter, I feel like I need to put my air conditioner on. You could just feel it, man. You could just feel the heat off the screen, the sweat. And it's just such an affecting, it's just an unsettling film that really just infects you to the core. And I'm glad I read this book, and I want you guys to read it. And if we're giving this a rating, a 5-star rating, it's a 6-star book. Gunnar also goes in at the end, toward the end, he goes into, why do we like horror films? Why do people enjoy horror films? And I'm not going to get into all that because many, many, many people have written articles and tried to understand why weirdos like me would want to sit and waste my time watching a horror film. And here's the thing, I don't know. I know that when you watch a horror film, it's often described as being on a roller coaster. You know you're safe, but you want that thrill. For me, a horror film just shows what we live through in society daily. And if you're simply afraid or you don't want to watch a horror film, then you probably shouldn't walk out of your door. And most art is just a reflection of society. Because history is bloody. History is not pretty at all. History is bloody and violent. And that's what creators, that's where most of our inspiration comes from. That's what we have to look back on. Now, you don't have to make a horror film. You can make a romance. But if you want to tell, a real story about something that really happened in the past, 9 times out of 10, if you're telling it in the way of a horror, like a horror story, like for example, if you're talking about a guy who is wearing the mask that's been fashioned from a bunch of dead people, and he's wearing their decayed flesh. Well, you only have to look to Ed Gein, a real life person who did stuff like this, who gutted people like they were deer. And it's not hard to find. And when Gunnar goes off to, when Gunnar goes off on, asking that age-old question, I mean, I think I think he goes into detail about it really well. But no matter how many times I read one person's perspective over another about why we watch horror films, it's like, well, why do you watch romance? Why do you watch a Western movie? Why do you watch anything? Why do you read anything? You like what you like. And I think for me, horror is, here's the thing, if you watch a comedy movie and it's not funny, that's more embarrassing than watching a horror film that isn't scary, because really, most folks are desensitized by now. I mean, you have the evening news where you see horrible things happen to people. You have websites where you can watch people die, people doing horrible things to other people. So when you watch a movie, you already know it's fake. You already know it's artistic. And luckily for me, even when I was a young man and I was watching these things, I knew there was artistry behind it all. I knew there was somebody with a camera. I knew there was somebody behind the camera giving direction. I knew the big hulking figure wearing the face of a dead person was an actor. And that's why I wanted to start making movies and start writing. And I think when you're an impressionable young man and you see a movie like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and it really inspires you, you just kind of cling to that genre. Are all horror movies good? No. Some of them, most of them, I mean, a lot of them are stupid. I'm a huge slasher fan, but I'll admit to you right now, most of them are redundant. There's a formula. There's a real formula. There's a blueprint to a slasher film. But I love that genre. It's my favorite genre. And when that genre is done right, to me, it doesn't get any better as far as horror is concerned. But anyway, that's my take on Chainsaw Confidential by Gunnar Hansen. Give it a listen and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think. Moving on to the next book. This is a book called The Girl in the Creek. I was at the library and I just randomly picked up this book. And nothing about it really jumped out at me. Not the title. I mean, the cover was kind of cool. But I said, you know what? Something just made me gravitate toward the book. So I picked it up and I gave it a quick listen. I gave it a quick read from the dust jacket. And I brought it home. And it's described as an eco horror book, which I've not read many books on. I'm sorry, not eco. It's eco horror. I haven't read really, a lot of books on that. But to kind of sum it up, we have a character named Erin, who her brother's gone missing. Her brother Brian has gone missing, and he's been missing for a few years at this point. And she goes to the town where he went missing, and she wants to write an article, but she wants to look for her brother. He just seems like he just disappeared into thin air. And Erin has a few friends. Some of them want to do a podcast about, apparently there's other missing people in this town of Faraday. There's a few missing people, so they want to do a podcast to kind of shed light on that and kind of bring some closure to the families. And especially Erin, because she lived it. Her brother's missing. She knew what that did to her family. She knows what it does to her. She continues to live with that. And that's got to be like just a horrible experience. When a child or a loved one just goes missing and you never have answers, that's got to be the worst. So they end up in this town, and they also find out that there's other people missing. And the book kind of goes back and forth with the character's perspective and also the perspective of strangeness. Now, what is the strangeness? The strangeness is described in this book as sort of an entity that takes over people and animals. But then you ask yourself, where does the eco part come in? Well, let me tell you, you're not going to ever look at mushrooms the same way again, so don't even try. But the eco part is, and I hope I'm understanding this correctly. I hope I'm, because I really did enjoy this book. This book was a 4-star book, no doubt about it. But the strangeness that's been there kind of coalesced with the ecosystem around, and it just kind of takes over people. And they're not zombies. I mean, I guess you could make an argument that they possibly, some of them could be, but it's not a traditional zombie thing. So don't let me stray you in the wrong direction. This is not a zombie book. But they are almost reanimated. these these dead people. Like one of the missing women is definitely reanimated in some way. And it's all through the strangeness and the ecosystem. And I found that very fascinating. I liked that. I thought it was a really good book. This is not really a criticism, but there's a lot of characters to follow. Sometimes I got confused as to who was who after a while. There's a side plot with a serial killer that I thought was very interesting, very well done, very creepy. And overall, I just liked Wendy's writing. I thought it was very fresh, a very fresh idea. And maybe it's not fresh in the eco horror genre, but for me it was, because it was the first for me. And I really liked her writing. I really liked what she had to say, because there were layers to this book. Wendy has things to say regarding climate change, regarding when certain people go missing, and it's just for whatever reason, especially if it's a woman, it's just not really investigated. Now, the town sheriff is a woman, and she seems to care. But overall, these missing people are forgotten about. I wouldn't really say forgotten about, but it seems almost like an afterthought. But it's also a really weird town. So, when you read Girl in the Creek, you're going to be delighted with the writing, the pacing. It's a slow burn, deliberately so. Wendy does a fine job setting up the plot. I mean, I've never been to the Pacific Northwest, but I feel like I've been there now. She does an incredible job with just writing about the area and where you're at. You can almost feel like you're there. You almost feel like you're there. And if you're in the woods, if you've ever gone on a hike, and you just imagine the ecosystem in the woods, the trees, everything in the woods turning against you, that's pretty horrifying. Now, I'm not saying in this book that the trees turn against you, but I know with something like The Ruins, it's kind of like that. And that's horrifying, man. Just to think that the place where you inhabit, or the stuff around you, can just turn on you. So yeah. Anyway, check out Girl in the Creek if you want. Check out Chainsaw Confidential. I hope I did the two books justice. I hope I did Girl in the Creek justice. That wasn't as easy of a book to take in as a memoir like Chainsaw Confidential. Girl in the Creek took a little bit more. I had to do a little bit more read through, go back and read some, until finally I just had to give the book back to the library. But the Girl in the Creek, definitely, you should definitely pay attention when you read, because there's a lot of stuff going on. And Wendy is saying something. She's saying something. There's a lot there within the characters, within the entire plot of what's going on. And I really liked everything about the book. Like I said, sometimes the characters I got a little mixed up with the characters. That's not really a criticism. That's just, sometimes I do that. And I do like a book where there's a lot of characters. I like books where there's minimal characters, of course, but it has to go with the story, right? Like if you're writing a horror like a haunted house story, and it's a couple. If it's done correctly, I could live with the couple for a few hundred pages and be fine with it. Right, like something like Rosemary's Baby. Few characters. We mainly stick with Rosemary. That's cool. But this book has a lot of characters, and I like that. I like to get to know people. Right, I like to get to know people in these books, and just once in a while they just got I just and that could have been my fault. That could have been my short attention span or something. That's really not a criticism to the writer, because I am recommending this book, Girl in the Creek. 4 out of 5 stars. Check it out. Check out Gunnar Hansen's Chainsaw Confidential. Both are well worth your time. Thank you for listening, and I will be back with another one of these long, drawn out, boring ass, whatever you want to call it. But until next time, folks, have a great day. Stay within those pages. Keep reading, man. Keep reading. Keep moving forward. Don't look back. Take it easy, everybody.